In a moldering house, Ambrose, a recluse, shares his thoughts on sorcery and sanctity with Cotgrave, a visitor. Ambrose believes that magic and the spiritual world are not limited to the good, but also exist in the wicked. He thinks that great sinners, like great saints, are rare and have a unique connection to the spiritual world. Ambrose argues that evil is not about committing sinful acts, but about seeking ecstasy and knowledge that belongs to angels, which makes humans demonic. He distinguishes between the sinner and the mere murderer, citing Gilles de Rais as an example of a sinner who is also a murderer. Cotgrave is fascinated by Ambrose's ideas and asks questions to clarify his thoughts. Ambrose explains that sin is an attempt to penetrate a higher sphere in a forbidden manner, which is unnatural and rare. He believes that saints try to recover a lost gift, while sinners try to obtain something that was never theirs. Ambrose also thinks that people often fail to recognize real wickedness due to their blunted higher senses. The story revolves around Cotgrave, who engages in a conversation with Ambrose about the nature of sin. Ambrose believes that sin is an esoteric and occult thing, distinct from social misdoing. He explains that true evil has nothing to do with social life or laws, but is a lonely passion of the soul. Cotgrave is intrigued by Ambrose's perspective and asks for a concrete example of sin. Ambrose shows him a green pocketbook, which he claims will illustrate their discussion. The book is a diary written by a young girl who reveals her knowledge of secret languages, ceremonies, and dances. She writes about her ability to communicate with mysterious beings and her participation in rituals. The diary hints at dark and sinister forces at play. I had a strange and wonderful adventure when I was almost 14 years old. It started when I followed a brook that led me into a new country. I walked through many bushes, thorny thickets, and dark woods, tearing my frock and getting scratched. I felt like I was going on forever, but I kept going until I reached a hill with big, ugly gray stones. The stones seemed to have faces and looked like they could jump out and grab me. I was scared, but I went on, singing songs that the rocks seemed to put into my head. As I walked, the rocks started to look like animals, words, and even dead people. I felt like I was in a different world, one that nobody had ever seen before. I climbed a big, round mound and sat on a stone at the top. From there, I saw the rocks arranged in patterns and shapes, like circles, pyramids, and domes. It felt like I was turning, too, and I got dizzy and saw sparks of blue light. I was frightened, but I got up and slid down the mound, dancing and singing as I went. I felt like I was imitating the rocks' dance. I went through another dark thicket and came to a secret valley with a little stream of water. The water tasted like bright, yellow wine, and I drank it with my hand and then bent down to suck it up with my lips. I felt like there was a nymph living in the water, kissing me. I went up the valley under hanging hills, and when I reached the top, I saw a steep green wall in the sky. I thought I had reached the end of the world. I sat down, thinking about the long way I had journeyed and wondering how I would get home again. That's when I saw a wonderful well with bright, green, dripping moss all around it. The well was deep and shining, and I could see the red sand at the bottom. As I stood by the well, I gazed into its depths, mesmerized by the moving red grains of sand and the bubbling water. The well's tranquil surface reflected the surrounding green moss, making it resemble a great white jewel. I removed my boots and stockings, letting my feet cool in the water. Refreshed, I decided to explore further, climbing up the wall to discover a strange, unfamiliar land. The landscape was unlike anything I'd seen, with hills, hollows, castles, and walls made of earth and covered with grass. I stumbled upon two massive beehive-like mounds and a steep wall reminiscent of those by the seaside. As I explored, I recalled a tale my nurse had told me about a brave girl who ventured into a similar hollow pit, despite warnings. She emerged with beautiful emerald earrings, a ruby, and a diamond necklace, claiming they were made of green grass, red stones, and white stones. As I stood in the hollow, I felt a sense of eeriness, remembering the nurse's story. I performed a charm to ward off evil, then climbed out and continued my journey. The landscape shifted, revealing patterns similar to the gray rocks. I spotted two figures lying on the grass, but it was getting late, and the air grew indistinct. I entered a secret wood, following a narrow, dark path. In the open center, I witnessed a breathtaking sight, but fear drove me to flee. I ran back home, my heart pounding and strange cries escaping my lips. A full moon guided me through the mounds and hollows back to my house. That night I lay awake, reliving my adventure. I wondered if it was real or just a tale, like those my nurse used to tell. The stories flooded back, mixing with my memories of the gray rocks, hollows, and secret wood. I couldn't distinguish reality from fantasy, unsure if it was all just a dream. I remembered a white lady with dark eyes and black hair, who told me stories starting with "once on a time" or "in the time of the fairies." I wondered if she was the same lady I saw in the wood, but I thought she couldn't be, as she seemed to have gone a different way. I was afraid something had happened to me, like the poor girl in Nurse's tale who went into a hollow pit and was carried away by the black man. I recalled another story about a young man who hunted a beautiful white stag all day, till the sun set behind the mountain. The stag led him through enormous woods, across rivers, and into dark valleys, till they reached a beautiful valley with a bright stream and a great round hill. The stag vanished into the earth, and the man found a door in the hill, where he met the queen of the fairies, who had changed herself into a stag to bring him there. She offered him enchanted wine, and they fell in love. Nurse told me more tales, including one about a hill where people used to meet at night, playing strange games and doing queer things. They would dance and sing in an old language, and some would fall to the ground shrieking and tearing with their hands. The singing went on till the moon rose, and then they had supper, with a boy and girl bringing bread and wine that tasted different from common food. They danced and played extraordinary games, and sometimes people would disappear and never be heard of again. I was only 8 years old when my nurse took me on a secret adventure. She made me promise not to tell anyone about it, or I'd be thrown into a black pit with the dead people. We went to a hidden spot in the woods where she made a strange doll out of clay. She sang rhymes and did peculiar things with the doll, making it seem like magic. We left the doll there, hidden away in the bushes. A few days later, we returned to the same spot. Nurse made me promise again not to tell anyone, and we crept back into the bushes. She took out the clay doll and showed me how to pay our respects. We played with the doll, pretending all sorts of things. Nurse said her great-grandmother had told her about these images and that they were just a game. But then she told me a scary story about a beautiful lady named Cassap, who lived in a castle. Cassap was kind to everyone, but she refused to marry any of the gentlemen who wanted her hand. She was secretly the queen of the people who danced on the hill on summer nights. She knew how to do awful things, like destroying young men and putting curses on people. Cassap would sneak out of the castle to gather flowers, but really she'd sing a special song, and snakes would come crawling out of the woods to surround her. She'd whisper to them, and they'd twist around her body. When she was done, they'd leave, and she'd have a beautiful, shiny stone called a glame stone. There were 5 gentlemen who wanted to marry Cassap, but one of them, Sir Simon, was suspicious. He pretended to go away, but came back disguised as a servant girl to spy on Cassap. He discovered her secret and saw her making wax dolls, just like the one my nurse made. Lady Aveline, a wicked woman, used dolls to curse 4 knights: Sir Dickon, Sir Roland, Sir Noel, and Sir John. She'd perform a ritual, saying a rhyme, and the next day the knight would meet a terrible fate. The lady was eventually caught and burned at the stake. The narrator, a young girl, heard this story from her nurse, who told her many dark and magical tales. The nurse taught the girl games like Troy Town, where one could be forced to answer questions truthfully, and another game that could turn people into animals. The girl was fascinated by these stories and wondered if they were true. She'd seen something amazing in the secret wood, but her father didn't believe in such things. The girl was torn between believing in the magic and thinking it was just nonsense. She remembered the nurse's stories and rhymes like "Halsey Cumsey Helen Musty," and would often think about them. She'd go to the turfy hill by the river where she'd played Troy Town with the nurse and think about the secret wood. The girl was scared, but also thrilled by the possibility of magic being real. She took great care not to do anything that might be dangerous, but she couldn't shake off the feeling that something amazing was waiting for her. The story begins with a young girl who creates a clay figure, just like her nurse had done before. She then goes on a journey to a secret place, following a brook and navigating through dark woods and thorny thickets. She reaches a hill with strange rocks that seem to dance around her. She then goes to a secret valley, where she takes off her boots and stockings and dips her feet in a warm, pleasant water, saying special words and making signs. After that, she climbs up a steep wall and enters a place with hollows, mounds, and ridges of land. She sees figures called Adam and Eve and understands a story she had forgotten. She then enters a secret wood, binds a handkerchief around her eyes, and walks slowly, feeling her way. Her heart beats fast, and she's scared, but she continues until she reaches the end of the path. The story then jumps to the girl's encounter with a white lady who she had seen before in the wood. She understands that the lady is connected to the nymphs, who are magical beings that can help her. Nurse had told her about the nymphs, but she didn't understand until now. There are two kinds of nymphs, bright and dark, and they can appear in different shapes and forms. The epilogue features a conversation between Cotgrave and Ambrose, who are discussing the girl's story. Ambrose explains that the references to nymphs are actually about ancient processes that have been passed down through tradition. He believes that these processes are real and can be proven scientifically. Cotgrave is skeptical, but Ambrose shares his own experiences with people who have stumbled upon these processes by accident and achieved unexpected results. Ambrose shared a story about a lady whose child's fingers were crushed by a window. He then mentioned a statue of Roman workmanship, hidden in a thicket, which was used by followers of an old tradition in the Middle Ages. The statue was made of a luminous white stone that didn't blacken with age. Those who saw it had to blindfold themselves on their second visit. Ambrose had the statue destroyed. He believes that old traditions persist, even in secret, and that the original story is more fascinating than its aftermath.